Beloveds, today we are joined by current and former members of our UCC Disability Ministries Board. We are joined, and I invite them to screen, Becca, Kim, and Laura. Look, y'all don't know on the other end how much time I harass these folks. I'm always sending them emails. I'm always calling. If we're in group settings together, I'm following them around like just a fan. I am such a groupie, and it is so good to have you all here. We got an opportunity last year to really dream about how could we help expand on this really important text that had just been released called Building Up a New World. Congregational Organizing for Transformative Impact. And we really wanted to delve into chapter 5. And so these folks have done some great work building up a curriculum to support that. We ended up using that same text, that Building Up a New World, Congregational Organizing for Transformative Impact, as our all church read this year. And we'll go ahead and put a link into chat for that all church read. You can access that curriculum and some of the work that these smart, brilliant, loving, and caring people help to create. But we're going to go deeper today. And so I am just so happy to have you all here. And just as tradition with the webinar, I'm checking in. How is your soul today?
Thanks so much, Ellie. This is Becca, and my soul is doing all right today, I think. Definitely very heavy with a lot of the things that are happening in the country and the world. But really appreciating the adorableness of my cat. You have and will continue to see her on the screen. Her name is Jasmine. And really getting involved in some creative projects lately that are really doing a lot to enrich and bring joy to my soul. So thank you.
Oh, I love that you're finding art and creative projects and animals and other creatures and beings to bring you some nurture and care during this time. Thank you, Becca.
My soul is tired, which is a graduation from weary. So I've just had a lot of health stuff, and as Becca said, the world is kind of falling apart around us. But I do have some joy and other good things that are happening in my life, like this meeting. So I'm hoping to go from weary to tired to neutral to happy, just keep progressing forward.
Right? Because we can be the multitudes of things and allow ourselves to grow and change and to feel all of the things. Thank you for that reminder, Laura. Kim.
Hi, my soul has pockets today, and all of those pockets are full of lots and lots of things. So, some of the pockets are filled with grief, some of them are filled with the excitement of this webinar, and some of them are filled with just like Becca, the cat that won't leave a Zoom meeting alone. And so, if you see my cat walk across the screen, that's Eagle Eye Sniper Rifle from Fortnite the Cat. I have teenagers, they name all the animals. I don't know. And so you say hi to Fortnite when she comes across the screen.
I was going to
She's
say,
in one of those pockets.
is that her in trouble name?
Yes, if she's in trouble, or it's also fun at the vet's office when because we make sure that the full name obviously gets called out at the vet's office. And so that's always fun because you can hear them giggling on the other side of the door before they come out to announce that it's her turn.
Oh, I love that. I secretly have in my mind that both yours and Becca's cats are communicating via Zoom right now,
Absolutely.
right?
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. They hear that Zoom is on, and Fortnite came from outside because she wanted to see Jazzy. So
See, I don't think Jazzy knows Fortnite is there because if she did, she'd be hissing at the screen.
Uh-oh.
Very friendly to people, very unfriendly to cats.
Ah, yeah, I look, animals are the best things in the world for sure. Well, I am just so honored to be here with each of you today. Look, is somebody sharing in the chat? Smokey just arrived here, so we've got the clan everywhere. I love it. Um, So yeah, the work that you all do is so incredibly special. In the world, in your own everyday daily lives, within your own ministry settings, and I think also with the United Church of Christ Disability Ministry Board, right? And so I know how busy you are. So for the grace that you gave me to come and ask you last year, hey, this is what I want. I think the chapter in the book is absolutely lovely, but as my background is in as a special education teacher and disability studies person, that I wanted to go deeper into it, and I thought that this would be an opportunity. And besides, like I said, I like to hang out with you all. So um, here we are, and we have a 3-part series. And I think what I wanted to ask you beyond like how to get this conversation started is for us to talk a little bit about language. There is so much co-opting of language that happens traditionally. There's the evolution of language, but in particular in this really interesting rhetoric, narrative, language time that we find ourselves in. I'm curious that if you are hearing a lot of questions about the right words to use around disability, what kind of language do you recommend? Because I know the first time that we all met, I was using another word, and you're like, why aren't you just saying this instead? And I was like, because I use people first language. And you're like, actually, this is what we prefer. And I'm like, I can start asking people preferences and those things beyond just pronouns as well, right? And so I love that we're leading off this conversation with this question, the question about what are the right words to use to talk about disability, and then what kind of language do you recommend for folks to use?
Yeah, thank you so much, Ellie. Yeah, we really wanted to start with talking about language because that is the question that is so often at the top of people's minds, and if you don't answer it first, it's hard to pay attention to anything else. Um, and also because it's just a really complicated question, because different people and different communities are going to prefer different terms, and sometimes the literal words that we use have different definitions to different people. So it's a really complex question.
And it's also really important to remind ourselves that disability and disabled are not bad words. I think a lot of times maybe it's the prioritizing of the comfort that comes with ableism, but it's uncomfortable to say disabled or disability for folks. But that's actually best practice is to use disability, and so it's you can either have either as a person with a disability or a disabled person. Again, a lot of times this language comes down to talking to folks and figuring out what they like the best.
Some terms like handicapped, differently abled, handicapable, and special needs imply that speaking directly about disability is like inappropriate or wrong, but it's not. It's very, we live with our disabilities. We know it's there. You're not going to surprise us by talking about it.
Yeah, and we also tend to shy away from some of those terms that Laura mentioned because they can be seen as diminishing or sanitizing the impact of disability on our lives. Like Laura said, like we know that it is real, and it feels like other people like those words can kind of trivialize it and try to say like it's not that big a deal, and exactly what kind of big deal disability is very individual and up to the person. But it generally does have a big impact on people. So those are some words that we tend to avoid.
And don't get too into your head about this. It's one of those things where we don't need to be necessarily policing people on what they're saying unless it's to call them in gently, but also remember that Each person has the right to identify however they choose. Some people use these or other words to describe themselves. So everything, everything with flexibility, just like with disability, you got to have a lot of give and take. So, you're having your first lesson in disability justice with that flexibility there.
Mhm.
So when you speak just generally, if like best practices is just to use the word disability. And when you speak about an individual, use the language that they use for themselves. So for example, I have dwarfism, I am a little person, those kind of terms. And but somebody else might go by a different diagnosis or just have a different identity that they want to be used. And if you don't know, ask. It's okay to ask. That people are very timid about that, but I'd much rather you ask me a question than make an assumption, positive or negative.
And I think what I hear you all say is that once somebody tells you how they would like to be identified, that you be consistent with it,
Mhm.
right? It's not that you jump back and forth, and it's okay to make a mistake as long as it's not, coming from an intent of harm or erasure or anything like that. I'm wondering, how do you handle those kind of things if that happens?
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of compared it to telling someone or asking someone for their pronouns earlier, and I think it is similar, that it's the kind of thing where, like, if someone makes a mistake and refers to me in a way, actually this does happen somewhat frequently. I have a dear colleague who is also disabled, and one of their disabilities is memory related, and so, like, it just literally takes a long time for any sort of language shift to register for this person. And they keep calling me a person with sighted issues. I am blind. That is the word that I use, and I have never used the term sighted issues to describe myself, nor has any visually impaired person that I know. Um, and so it's, I just, when he uses it, I say, hey, by the way, term is blind or visually impaired. And he goes, oh, okay. And we just move on from there.
I want to call out in the chat. There was a comment. There are some words you should not use, though, and absolutely there are words that should never be used. And I'm not going to use it here. If I'm sure that many folks can guess what they are. And again, it goes back to disability is a good blanket word to use until you know somebody's preferred terms that they use for their own disabilities, and then go with that. So I want to just lift up David for putting that in the chat.
Totally. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So when we talk about disability, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean when you say disability?
Yeah, so again, this is a really nuanced term, because, like, I think people think that they know what they're saying when they use the word disability, and then when you ask someone to define it, it gets really complex and convoluted. And part of why that is there are different models for understanding disability. There are different ways of framing not just what it is, but how it relates to the individual and their environment and the other people and things around them. So the model that most people are probably most familiar with, even if you don't know this term, is the medical model. And so, under the medical model, the definition of disability is that a disability is a problem within the individual. It's something physical or mental that is quote unquote wrong with how your body or mind works. And this this then means that it's the individual's job to minimize the effect of that, or the impact of that problem on other people. You can see this in the ways that people will often when they find out that someone's disabled, like, sometimes the first thing they say is, I'm sorry. You get a lot of, well, like, if someone can't walk, like, sometimes there's a lot of emphasis on trying to get them to walk, whether that's something that they want or not. So kind of dominant model in a lot of society is the medical model that says disability is a problem that needs to be fixed if it possibly can be.
Another model is the charity model. And I'm just gonna say it, and I'm gonna call out churches right now, because churches very frequently will fall into this model. And it's the model of disability where it's the view that a person with a disability is helpless. Folks with disabilities are helpless and they need to be cared for. But this model regards folks with disabilities as objects of charity, as like recipients, but not folks who have anything to give or offer. So it's the model where people feel pity for somebody, and it creates a situation where disabled folks are entirely dependent on others. So it's something to watch out for, especially as you're considering your church's own engagement with the disabled community.
Common and more popular model in the disability community is the social model. And this focuses on removing barriers that deny people with disabilities equal access to opportunities. So, for example, when I'm in my own home, I have an impairment. I can't walk very well, but I'm not disabled till I try to take my wheelchair out the door, up a flight of stairs, to doors without buttons, elevators that don't work. That's what it's the society that is disabling me versus in the environment. The other thing is, it's the social model isn't a pure model. There are still disabilities, like I have arthritis. So I've spent this last week in bed, and that's not society's fault. That's my own body beating me up. So social model isn't like a perfect model, but if you think about all the models, they all have a little something to give to you.
Yeah,
And
so kind
yeah,
of an overarching definition of disability that we might use is that it's a difference in body or mind from what society considers quote unquote normal, that society then has a problem with, right? That society does not see as something that it's willing to accommodate. So, an example of this might be, blind in our current society. Blindness is definitely considered a disability because their society isn't really, by and large, is not built to accommodate the things that people with significant visual impairments need, like braille signage or a lot of access to large print. Whereas wearing glasses that correct your vision to perfect or near perfect is no longer considered a disability. At other times it would have been, but that is now a difference that is considered part of the overall norm of society. So that's kind of how you can think about the social model and how it defines disability. And that's the framework that we're working from, is that disability is not inherently a problem in the individual, it is a difference. And how much that individual experiences that disability as it causing pain and difficulty on its own, like with arthritis or chronic pain or other chronic pain, or whether it's society that is and its lack of access that's creating the problem. That's going to vary from individual to individual.
If I may ask another question off of this, we're also speaking about this month is Disability Access Sunday. We have a Disability Access Sunday coming up, and so while you can't, if your congregation doesn't have an opportunity to have and host a Disability Access Sunday on the Sunday that it is, October is the month to do it, or January. It doesn't matter when you get to it to have the conversation about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think my question around the disability is, how do you hear or take in this when people share, well, really, disability impacts everyone at some point in their life, right? At some point, we all interact and experience disability, whether it be a lifelong journey, if it's a momentary, like in our childhood, in our middle age, in our later age. What is that? Do you find that that is a good narrative to bring folks into understanding disability and disability justice more? Or do you think it scares people away because we don't want to think of it because of how we frame disability? Does that make sense?
I think so.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean it might scare people, but I'm okay with that.
Feels like a both and, honestly.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I was gonna say. I think
Yeah.
it's kind of, it really depends on how you present it and what the person is receiving, because I can say one thing and someone can hear something completely different. But I also think when I think of disability, like everybody encounters disability in their life, like you said, lifelong, temporary, whatever. But it's interesting to see people's reactions, and the word I'm going to use is acceptable disabilities, which is kind of like what Becca was saying about glasses and stuff. Like if I break my leg, people will make accommodations for a couple of weeks or a month until my leg heals. But if I'm in a wheelchair my whole life, some of my friends will make accommodations. Some of them just can't because they're expensive. And other times, when, like I said, society doesn't always step up to the plate. So I would say you are disabled sometimes, but you don't necessarily have a disability. And then there's age, and everybody expects you to get old and have troubles with things. But when you start out young with a disability, there's more of a like, well, I wonder what's wrong there. And there's all these different, so it's a very complex question, and I hope I didn't make it muddier by my answer.
Yeah, and I'll add on to that I think that it can be very helpful to remind people that disability is closer to them than they might think. Um, whether that's the reminder of, we will all be disabled at some point if we live long enough, or the statistic that 1 in 4 people are disabled. So, it is statistically highly unlikely that no one in your friend group or family or church community is disabled. Um, I think that can make people uncomfortable, but it also, I think it's a productive discomfort. The thing that I hear a lot that I worry about more, in addition to the points that Laura brought up, is, sometimes when we talk about how broad the category of disability can be and how it's about, society stigmatizing certain ways of being in the world. People will come to me and be like, I understand now, we're all disabled because we all have things that we struggle with that society doesn't accept about us, and it's really all the same, and I understand where people are coming from with this, that there's a desire to make connection, right? Um, but I would push back on that to say, for all that disability is a very broad and nuanced and complex category, it is still a category that not all experiences fall under, and that it might be more precise to categorize some experiences in a different way. And it also, there's I've lost part of this sentence halfway through it. But yeah, there's this sense of, when someone's saying we all have things that we struggle with that society doesn't accept, we're kind of going back to almost a medical or a charity model where, if someone's saying, their experience of, growing up in poverty is like a disability in the way that it continues to linger with them. It's like, well, not necessarily. Like, there that kind of boils down the experience of disability to being a bad thing that happens to you that you have to live with. And disability can be a lot more nuanced and complex and joyful and beautiful. And so I simultaneously want people to move closer to the category of disability and to think about the ways that it impacts or will impact their lives. And I also want people to have some awareness that doesn't mean that disability will encompass every single experience.
Yeah.
And I just to add to the conversation, I think one of the powerful things about disability, and especially as far as a justice issue, it is one of I mean, it might be the only justice issue. No, one of the only justice issues that can intersect with all of the other justice issues, because disability is, is not something that discriminates. It's, it shows up beautifully across the board in so many different communities. And so when we think about organizing and justice, disability is a really powerful connector. And so, you can't leave disability out of things. And so when I think about talking about how disability in that argument of we all are going to experience disability at some point in our lives, also remembering like disability is a universal experience no matter where you are on the globe and no matter where you are economically or socially or anything. So I think that it's a very powerful connector for justice movements.
Yeah. Well, that was a beautiful curveball that I threw you all, and that you handled very nicely. Thank you for that. Because I know as a pastor in my own context and congregation, right? So I'm in the process of thinking about what our church stands for in the community that it finds itself, and the actual religious violence that is possible, as well as the age of the congregation, the way that the pews, the chairs are laid out, what happens with active shooters, what happens with fires, what happens with heart attacks, what happens when one of our members has a moment of where they don't feel safe, right? And so how do we care for everybody in the building? And it's super, super frustrating for me to get people to understand, what needs to be done in those cases. And so I always come back to it as a way we are all going to experience some type of interaction with disability in our lives, whether it's with our loved ones or with ourselves and all of those things. And so I think I was checking in for myself, and I know others who have done that as well, as a way to just to get that point across. This is why safety matters for everybody in the congregation. If we care for the congregation member who, I think Laura, you said it, I could break my leg and there's going to be accommodations there. But what if you have a walker? What if you have a wheelchair your whole life? And how are those accommodations made for the longer period, right? Yeah. Kim.
I just want to I'm going to call this comment out that's in the chat again from David. So David, whoever you are, if you want to be on the board, we've got applications because you're saying some really great things. So David said, saying we are all disabled minimizes the very real struggles that people with disabilities have. So thank you for sharing that. I think that's a good way to cap that all off. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. And we'll put a link on how to be a member of the board in our follow-up email. Well, that sounds like a wonderful opportunity for me to continue to invite all of the viewers who are watching this live and to go ahead and use that Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. It's the ellipses. It has a question mark in the middle and the letters Q, ampersand, A underneath it. Go ahead and use that as an opportunity to ask questions. If you are watching this at a later time, or if somebody has shared this video with you and you have some questions, we'll be sure to put my email information into the chat as well. But you can always find me, Reverend Ellie Hutchison, United Church of Christ, National Ministry Setting. I'll pop up. Email me, and I will make sure that the folks here get those questions and are able to provide answers. So with that, the presenters here, our panelists, asked me to invite you all to share into chat one example of ableism that you've seen in your congregation and or your community? So we'll think about that a little bit. I'll say it one more time and we'll put it into chat as well. What is one example of ableism that you've seen in your congregation or your community? And we'll go ahead and dip into those a little bit later. And so
I'm gonna say, if you don't know what ableism is, don't worry, you will in a minute.
yeah, so you've used the term ableism. What the heck? What is it? Who's it for? Help us
Yeah,
out.
so ableism, kind of the most basic definition of it that you can have is it is prejudice against a disabled person with words and actions. So you know, a lot of the attitudes that we were talking about with the medical and charity models, those are ableism. That when you're pitying someone and assuming that they can't do anything for themselves, that's an attitude based on internalized ableism. When someone denies someone with a disability a job because they are discriminating on the basis of disability, that's another manifestation of ableism. So it could be very simply said that it's discrimination against people with disabilities, but we want to highlight it's actually a lot more nuanced and complicated than that. Spoiler alert, everything is more nuanced and complicated than it looks like on the surface.
One definition that we frequently use in our work with UCC Disabilities Ministries is Talila A. Lewis's definition, and it is a working definition, which is great. And we can get the link to that working definition to you all. But it's kind of a living document. So as things change, as language changes, as needs change, this definition on this website also changes. So Talila A. Lewis says that ableism is a noun, a system of assigning value to people's bodies and minds based on societally constructed ideas of normalcy, productivity, desirability, intelligence, excellence, and fitness. These constructed ideas are deeply rooted in eugenics, anti-Blackness, misogyny, colonialism, imperialism, and capitalism. This systemic oppression that leads to people in society determining people's values based on their culture, age, language, appearance, religion, birth, or living place, and their, we're going to put air quotes here, everybody, health and wellness, and or their ability to satisfactorily reproduce or produce, excel, again, air quotes heavily on this, excel and behave. You do not have to be disabled to experience ableism.
And I'll give a little breakdown. So, for example, when they talk about how health and wellness is related to weight, I don't know if someone who is overweight or fat, which is an okay word to say, thinks of themselves as disabled, but society judges them based on that weight difference. So you put in a value, skinny people over fat people, but if you get too skinny, then you're not healthy either. And so it's this idea that we value like sexism, male bodies over female bodies and things like that. Those are all terms of, under this definition, are all examples of ableism, because whenever you put one body type or mind type over another body type or mind, you are saying one is more valuable than the other. And ableism is so pervasive that we don't even know we're doing it. And you can have external ableism, like you think, oh, I don't like that. There's something about that person that's off. But you can have internal ableism where you say, well, there's something about me that's off. Mm-hmm. And examples are, I'm part of the little people community. We have conventions. And even at the community, there is a hierarchy. The more physically fit, the more shapely people with dwarfism are more popular. They get more dates, they get more friend groups. There's like little cliques. And we don't do it on purpose. We just congregate. So if you're there and you have achondroplasia is the most common type of dwarfism, or pseudochondroplasia, you kind of have a similar look, you are much more likely to have friends than the person who has multiple disability needs besides being a dwarf. So if you're a dwarf in a wheelchair on an oxygen tank that uses a little computer device to talk, you might find it harder to socialize, not because there's anything wrong with you, but because of the internalized ableism that is inborn in everybody from society. Another example that I thought it was funny at the time, but I was with another little person who was a little taller than me and a little older than me. And they wanted something I had, and they said, "Give it to me, you." And they used the M word, which I don't know if anyone knows the M word, but it's a bad word for little people. And I was like, if I'm one of them, what does that make you? Like, it's just this. So you can be ableist even if you're disabled, and you can be ableist if you're not disabled.
Yeah, and we should definitely. I tried to find the link for the Talia Lewis definition, but we will get that to send out afterwards. And we will also be sending out. We did a breakdown of this definition to kind of go over some of these maybe less familiar to some people terms like eugenics, and to explain why they apply to disability, but also how they apply intersectionally, and why intersectionality is such an important component of how ableism functions.
I'm just reading body language, making sure nobody else wanted to say anything. That was really, really powerful. I'm really appreciative of that. Kim, do you want to read what folks have been sharing into chat with their...
Sure. And I did put the link to that Talila A. Lewis definition in the
Thank
chat
you,
too.
Kim.
So, okay, so we have from Andrea, expecting that everyone that attends the service reads and can access/participate in worship through reading. So that's a pretty across the board. I think a lot of us have experienced that situation in churches for sure. Let's see, Janice. I see the access/participation with a sign, choir, and deaf interpreters at our church, along with simply closed caption when viewing online too. Christy says, thinking that making someone who is with me needs to go get a person or a key to work the elevator, get into the building, etc., is still considered as fully accessible. So yeah, that there needs to be multiple steps to access. Sophia, hi Sophia. Grew up with her. Congregation denying request for accessibility improvements included as part of a capital campaign as too expensive, even when the campaign exceeded its goals, and congregations not calling ministers with visible disabilities. Oof. Yeah.
Yep.
That's what I see. Are there some further down? Okay.
Yeah.
There we go. Thank you for those.
Those are some great examples, y'all.
Yes. Yes.
Brilliant, brilliant thoughts. Well, we do have some wonderful questions that have come in. We're going to go to our first question, which is, as a UCC hymn writer and liturgist who cares deeply about inclusive liturgy, I would love to learn from you what inclusive liturgy, including worship music, that addresses disability successfully might look like. I'm familiar with, for example, blessings of wheelchairs and other assistive devices, but would love to know what else might be meaningful.
Yeah, so we'll probably cover some of this in part 3 of this webinar series in 2 weeks. But I think we can share some resources just to start off with. If you want to see examples of liturgy, there's a lot of really great liturgy on uccdm.org under Access Sunday. The Access Sunday resources for the past, gosh, I don't even know how many years, include many parts of liturgy written by people with disabilities for all parts of the worship service. Including some music that's been written over the past 3 or 4 years. This year's song is so good, y'all. I wasn't involved in this one, so I can brag about it. It's so good. And I guess I would say like some a general piece of advice that I would give around music in particular, is we really like in the church world to use disability related metaphors. Think Amazing Grace, I was blind, but now I see. And these are metaphors that are basically equating disability, and in this case blindness, with a state of sin or ignorance. And that can be really harmful to people with disabilities who are trying to participate in worship, to just out of nowhere, like your entire embodied experience is being called sinful, even if nobody means it that way. That's how it's registering. And so kind of the two overarching strategies that I like to take around these things are, one, sometimes just removing that language, changing it. We have one of the pieces of music that we have on Access Sunday is a rewrite of that first verse of Amazing Grace. And then sometimes the other thing that you can do is add additional language, is multiply the language. So if you're talking about what it means to see God, what if we also talked about what it's like to hear God and what it's like to touch God? Let's expand our sensory language when talking about spirituality, so that we don't just have one mode of experiencing the divine, and we can name that people with disabilities experience the divine in our own particular ways that are valid and worthy to be lifted up in liturgy.
I think another thing, if we have time to highlight, is that when people, and Becca brought part of this up when she talked about the metaphors, but when people talk about healing stories from the Bible and stuff like that, a lot of times they're either on the more liberal side thought of as metaphorically, like, blindness equals the sin of not seeing God's will. But then also you have more like you have to be cured or healed, and that's a whole nother conversation. But just just really digging and thinking about how you preach on the healing stories is a really good liturgy strategy. Because if you have one or two disabled people in the congregation, they might come up to you afterwards and say, well, actually, that's not been my lived experience. And it's okay if they do, and not to get defensive when that happens. But or maybe even ask someone, like Becca saying about the Amazing Grace thing, that song never bothered me, but I can see. The song I really enjoyed was a Sunday school song about Zacchaeus and him being a wee little man. And everyone's like, well, why are you so attached to that? And I said, because I was a wee little girl, and Jesus loves Zacchaeus as a wee little man, so he must love me as a wee little girl. And so you can have these moments where the music lifts you up or where it squashes you, and it just really depends on how the message is given. And yeah.
And this is me. I'm always going to be recruiting and connecting for all those liturgists and musicians out there who are really interested in inclusive writing. We have a disability theology committee you could be on. So, I'm always going to be like trying to get folks to join us for those things. So if you're interested, get in touch with us, because we have a whole lot of fun.
And
They do.
I'll also just name, I am co-editing a collection of disability centering liturgy that doesn't have a publication date yet, but that will be happening. That includes liturgy written by a number of really amazing Christians with disabilities. So keep on the lookout for that.
That is exciting. When that book comes out, let me know.
Oh yeah.
We'll put a whole nother webinar on this. I love it. And thank you all for those very thoughtful, beautiful answers. We have another question that says, our congregation is working on our A2A checklist to submit to be designated with a plan. But as I understand it, we don't have to have bids in place, or how will we pay for everything as long as we are dreaming and studying for the future? Do you have any advice or comments on how to decrease the focus on money around these designations conversations?
Kim, you want to start us off on that? You're the A2A person, most person on this group, I think.
Wow. Okay. So, yeah. or how we will pay for everything. So dreaming and studying for the future. So the focus on money is a big one because that can be almost prohibitive to having the conversation. I think at this time in your process, I recommend focusing on all of the things you can do because that checklist does have, I would say a majority of the checklist are things that are very easy things to do, making space in your church for neurodivergent folks to STEM and do their stuff. That's my favorite one on the list anyway. Training your ushers, making sure that your bulletins, you also have large print and if possible Braille, and you have those kind of things that are not going to be as expensive. Try and turn the focus to that. And then with our checklist and our audit, we don't demand perfection immediately. I mean, we don't demand perfection ever. That would be ridiculous. But we do, like, the points add up. And so we have a scale of what we consider to be where we can give that A2A designation. And so at the end of it, there's a question that is that asks for your 1 year plan, 2 years, 5 years of things that you want to see down the future. And so if getting those budgets together is the thing that's giving you the most headache as far as getting your church on board with A2A, then add that into your 5-year plan is budgeting in for having the pieces that you're looking at that are more likely to things to do with the building itself, the more expensive pieces, and have that be part of your 5-year plan of what you're talking about. And our committee will work with you on figuring out the best ways to tackle those pieces. Have you, and so if you have not been in touch with our A2A committee yet, and you're just doing this without talking to us, chat with us, and we'll see if we can give you some ideas also, because I will say that I have played hooky from a lot of the most recent A2A committee meetings, because life has gotten lifey. But the ones that are in it every single month and making working with the churches are so knowledgeable and so able to help you to get through all those questions.
That's awesome, Kim. And can Chisholm agencies get A2A designations as well?
Oh my gosh, we would love that. It could be anyone. If conferences are interested in A2A designation, we do have a few A2A conferences. If different parts of the UCC are interested, if other hugs want to be A2A, we're ONA. And we would love to offer that, we would love to work with you in whatever group you're in to become A2A. So I think that the more that we can support one another and say this is important to all of us, that would be a really great place to start. So yes, Chisholm, get in touch with us. Let's see what we can do to have you become A2A.
Oh, I love that. Well, we have one final question before I let you all go, and I'm going to summarize this question, thinking about what is some advice that you can provide with people who may not have a visible disability. They allude to the fact that sometimes being the quote unquote most disabled has the most voice in settings. And so what is it like to have a non-visible disability? How do you communicate what your needs and wants are? How do you have those conversations with people?
I always show up with my ADHD cup to everything, so people know exactly what they're going to get. But I think that that's very valid. I think that assuming that the community you're part of has already done some work so that it's a safe place to self-disclose your disability. I think that for me, I like to always lead with it. I like to let people know, because that's not just some little teeny tiny piece of who I am. That's like, if I'm going to bring my whole self to my church community and before God, then that means that my hidden disabilities are going there with me. So I self-disclose. I know that's different for everybody. And people don't always feel safe in their communities, but that's what I tend to do. I don't know about other
Yeah.
folks.
I think, and this is very much speaking not from personal experience because my disability is usually pretty evident upon any in-person interaction with me. But what I've seen work very well for a lot of people is find your allies. Figure out who in a space that you're in. Oftentimes it's going to be other disabled people. But figure out who you don't need to argue with about why your needs are what they are, and who you don't have to explain every detail of your invisible disability to, and ask them for help. Because I have definitely seen it that when multiple people go and say this is a thing that's needed, I need this, my friend needs this, that both makes it a lot easier for you to advocate for yourself. It can build a lot of confidence, and it makes it harder for whoever you are advocating to, advocating at, makes it a lot harder for them to ignore you. And I'll also just give a little piece of advice for anyone who doesn't have an invisible disability. Is just this is a really important topic to uplift. You do not know who around you is disabled. There are some disabilities that you will be able to spot or learn about quickly, and there are a lot that you will not. So I would say just a general openness to people telling you their own experience, and just remember, if you are asking someone to do something physically, mentally, be aware that they may not be able to do it, or may need some help or some access in order to do it, and that's okay. That is normal and frankly expected.
I'd like to piggyback on what my colleagues have been saying and talk about not being, and this isn't necessarily for the person with invisible disability, but the person with, like a person without, don't be the disability police.
Mhm.
Like I remember, and people don't do it intentionally usually, but like there's so many people who have, like I have arthritis and you can see it in my bones, but some people have a heart condition, or they're like 24 with juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, younger onsetting, and they're not using a walker, but they have a handicap sticker. And people will yell at them for parking in the handicap spot and being a faker. And again, like Becca said, you don't know. Maybe they have a thing that makes them faint if they walk too far. And it's just, so err on the side of grace, really.
Yes, 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 yes. I was preaching and on mute, which is probably better if you ask any of my congregation members to put Ellie on mute when she preaches. Anyway, y'all, I really wanted to thank you all for everything that you do in your communities and the work here today. This has been such a rich conversation and such a really good beginning conversation, if you will, for what we have coming up next week. So next Thursday, we get to be back with you all at the same time with the same link. And we hope that if this conversation moved you, that you are interested in sharing it with somebody else. So share it with somebody, ask them to register. And so we do have 2 webinars next week, one on Monday and one on Thursday. This group will be back next Thursday, same time, for part 2, where we're going to explore the creation of the disability justice movement by queer and trans disabled folks of color. We're also going to discuss and explore the 10 principles of disability justice, which serve as a really good foundation and roadmap for congregations who are seeking to live into disability justice. And we are back on Monday for a special offering of Future of Faith with our New Hampshire's conference minister, Gordon Rankin. We're going to be talking about grace in the wilderness. It's going to be an engaging conversation around the future of faith for their local and regional context, and discover how finding grace in the wilderness can be a countercultural practice of living into our full expressions. I want to thank you all for joining us for this webinar today, for crowdsourcing the chat, for sharing those moments, for your emoticons, your questions to this panel always. So much gratitude to you for all that it is that you do in the world. And then, of course, for our tech and media team for helping to make sure this and all of our webinars are possible in live and in post-viewing form. And so I would love to invite the board here to share the current and previous board members to share a benediction to take us out today.
Sure. So today's benediction is actually, if you go to those Access Sunday resources, you too can use this in your congregation. It is from this year's Access Sunday resources, and it is written by Reverend Dr. J.J. Flagg, current UCC DM board member. So hear these words: Beloved, may we leave this place transformed by the example of Jesus's ministry among those whom the world has written off. May we be emboldened to welcome those who've been shut out, empowered to be in community with those who are often overlooked and even forgotten. May we live and move in and with deep gratitude for the invitation and opportunity to partner with God in loving others. Go in peace, friends.
Siblings in Christ, if you are moved by this conversation, if what's been offered here has helped enhance your ministry or has nurtured your soul for the journey, please consider donating to the annual fund of the United Church of Christ by texting UCC to 41444. Your support will help to provide programs like this, which are an essential part of our ministries in the United Church of Christ. Thank you for your support. Be blessed on your journey and know that you are not alone. We are holding you in prayer. Amen.